Sounds like you're in New York.
I know, right, with the science. All right. What's up, guys? Welcome to Creating 2019 with finally Miss Ashton Cantou. We've been trying since yesterday, and thank God for Zoom. But here we are talking on such an important topic about creating space by shedding what's no longer you. And I'm super excited to jam with my girl on this topic. So I am going to have you, babe, introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, what you're about. Let's go.
Perfect. Perfect. So my name is Ashton, Ashton Cantu, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Michelle a couple of years back at a breakthrough, a business breakthrough that we went to. It's just basically a mastermind of powerhouse coaches, and through that, I've just been able to really step into even further, more embodiment of leadership and coaching. What I do now is life mastery coaching and personal. I speak at various organizations around DFW. That's Dallas Fort Worth for those of you that aren't local. And I also do leadership coaching for high performance. So very just kind of multifaceted in my work like you, Michelle. I'm not niched in. I work with people from everything from trauma to business startups, from leadership to, working through breakups, you name it. So it's just kind of it's very, very tailored. But I also have a program I've written for women called Intrinsic Beauty, and that just works on like cultivating self-love, deepening your sense of deserving, enhancing self-care practices, which I've heard on some of the lives here, some really great tools for that too. But we all know how important that foundation is. And what I noticed is a lot of people were coming to me with goals and all these ambitions, but they hadn't really done the groundwork, which is another thing that we're going to talk about today, is basically the groundwork that needs to happen in order to make the other things happen.
Yes, and I'm excited to jam with you on this because a lot of people dive right into what's next with this new year spirit, which is awesome. I my birthday's New Year's Eve, so I love New Year's. It's like for me the rebirth, like that new cycle for me. But it's so important. What we're going to talk about is so fundamental in clearing space, creating space for these dreams to emerge, because it's all an inside game for me. So let's jam on that. Where do you want to start?
Okay. I'll start with kind of just me, because for me, I learned this through experience, right? This wasn't something that somebody taught me. Nobody was ever like, hey, you got to clear space for this body of life that you want to call in, that you need to be able to hold it, right? I kind of learned through self-sabotage that I didn't actually do the inner work, and I was taking 2 steps forward and 10 steps back a lot of the time, because I was dragging so much stuff with me into these new endeavors, into these new ambitions. And although I had the drive and I had the plan and I was taking committed action, I wasn't fully aligned, as Amber was talking about yesterday. And that lack of alignment wasn't because I wasn't doing the stuff. I was doing the stuff, but I didn't clear the space. So there was just so much that I was carrying, whether it be past traumas, whether it was self-doubt, limiting beliefs, all that just baggage, whether it be energetic or just even in a mindset, that really could not come with me into my next phase of becoming. What I really learned was you can't get to the life that you want to create, right? Like, yes, we can create these plans. Yes, we can have this reverse engineering with our blueprints. We can have the vision. We can start big picture. We can work our way backwards. And you can't physically get there through action. You have to become that which you say you want to attract. And that's relationships. That's relationship with money. That's relationship with your career. All of that. You have to really embody the things that you say that you want to bring into your life and call into your life. So in order to do that, you can't take a lot of things with you.
So how do we begin to even understand what to clear, how to clear? What is clearing space?
Okay. Well, for me, some of the more obvious things were just the stuff that's not working. 3 really just powerful questions that you can ask yourself in reflection, because it really does come down to self-awareness. I would say get a coach because you need a mirror. You don't know what your ineffective patterns are 99% of the time. You don't know where you're showing up, with masks, or where you're showing up fully, and vice versa. So I would say get somebody who can see you and who's, gentle, but firm with you at the same time, that can really mirror up to you and show you your ineffective patterns. But if you're building self-awareness, just asking yourself, like, what am I doing that's working? What am I doing that's not working? And that second question, what am I doing that's not working? You have to get radically honest with yourself and take a look at the results in your life and take ownership over, well, the way I've showed up in this relationship's not working. The way I'm showing up in my finances based on results with debt is not working. And then owning those ineffective patterns and deciding for different. The root word of decide, in like the Latin, I think, language, right? It comes back to when Michelangelo was carving the statue of David. They would ask him, what was your inspiration for David? And he would just tell them, well, I just carved away everything that was not David. And that's basically what I want to get across here today, is because throughout our life, we take on all of these ineffective patterns through conditioning, through social conditioning, through our families, through our cultures, like our small C cultures and our big C cultures. And a lot of that stuff's not us, right? It's really not us. So we have to start to carve away all of the things that are not who we really are. And it starts with that awareness of your ineffective patterns. Those are like the most obvious things, like just the literal tangibles, like in your results. Wow, clearly something I'm doing here is not working. So what can I choose to move away from?
And sometimes people have to hit rock fucking bottom to really get that wake up call, right? Like, please, like, because some of us are stubborn, myself included. And a lot of us, like I was saying in another live, I think this morning with my friend Angelisa, that we become kind of comfortable in the uncomfortableness, and it becomes part of us, and we're fighting for that thing because we think that thing is a part of us, right? And it's not.
Yeah. So like the struggle, that's something that I had to release. I had to release this warrior. And it's great to have that, like the idea of like you can overcome. That's a little bit different, but to have to think that your life is a constant battle and that you're only successful because you're winning up against the struggle, like that's a tough upstream way to go through life. And it was something just probably a couple of years ago, I decided I'm tired of learning my lessons the hard way. I'm sick of this story about the school of hard knocks, right? And having to learn everything the hard way or fail first. And I hear it so much. I hear people saying, well, I just learned that way. Well, yeah, because that's what you believe. So, it's releasing these stories too. And that's a big can of worms, because we got a whole library of stories that we tell ourselves. But the struggle is one of the stories that you have to struggle in order to succeed. And it doesn't mean that you don't embrace it when you're in it and that you don't have to move through it when it comes, but you don't have to live there. And a lot of people live in the story that life is just straight up struggle, and it's not.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It doesn't have to be hard, and we don't have to live in that struggle. We will come up with struggles, challenging, growing pains. It's part of life, especially when you're up to something big. If you're not experiencing that challenge, then you're not up to something big.
Right. Yeah, but there's a pretty there's a nice differentiation, because when your struggle's coming because you're growing and that you're actually expanding, or if your struggle's coming because you're making choices that are not in alignment for you, or if you're making choices that are ineffective. And that's just where that radical honesty comes in. So you got to cut away from the belief systems and the ineffective patterns, and that just takes awareness.
So let's talk about that awareness of so for me, again, it's like when people hit that rude awakening, that rock bottom, and sometimes it is disease. Sorry about that. Sometimes it is disease, and sometimes it is a divorce. Sometimes it's children, I believe, like for my mother, it was me running away that had her be like, whoa, what the fuck? So let's talk about that, because I also believe it doesn't have to fucking get to that point. What can you tell our audience in terms of how to create that awareness of what's not working, especially when you're so in it that you think it's so part of, it's so normalized what you're going through?
Well, there's really only two ways to shift like a paradigm or a belief system. The deep rooted beliefs that you're holding in your mind can only be shifted one of two ways. It's either going to be through something abrupt like that. Like even having a child can do that to you. And it's not necessarily a bad experience. It's just a life-changing experience. Anything that's like massive shift in your life can cause you to shift a paradigm. But you can be proactive. And you can recognize the ineffective patterns. And when you do that, you can start to choose to live life by design instead, and to really start to reprogram some of these beliefs that you know are running the script of your life. Like, hey, there's no good men out there. Well, your awareness comes in. I'm still single. My friends aren't. Well, my friends believe that there's good men out there. I don't. Well, why, how does that relate to my result? So literally you have to choose to stop living by default, and then choose to move into living by design. Because if we just get up and we just live the next 365 days, we get up, we breathe, we eat, we go to sleep, we wake up again, we'll have created a year of life. And a lot of people live the same year 90 times, like just over and over and over again. And we get to choose as conscious co-creators of our reality to, if we're not happy with the results we're getting, we get to choose to do something differently. And that takes the decision to cut away from and clear space.
So I love that. If it doesn't feel good, if it's not moving you forward towards your goal, if you're not creating results with it, right? And the results that light you up, not the results that like just have you be in that same conversation, spinning the same wheels, like really moving you forward. I love that.
That's the tangible stuff though. So what happens is when I talk about clearing space here, what we're seeing on a tangible level is more of just like surface. But why that's happening, like the question would be like, what's underneath that? So for me, an ineffective pattern, something I had to clear space with, something I had to release in order to step into my next phase of becoming, was vices, was choosing not to feel, was busying myself, whatever it was, exercise, busying myself, drugs, alcohol, whatever it was to avoid the human experience, you name it, I did it because I just did not want to have that uncomfortable feeling of feeling. And that was not working for me. But did I know that on a self-awareness level? No, I didn't know that the reason I was attracting certain relationships was because I wasn't feeling and dealing and healing, and that I was choosing all these other things to replace that. So clearing the space wasn't just clearing the vices, because that had to happen. But once I cleared the vices, then I had to see what was underneath the reason I was using the vices, and then clear that. Traumas, abuse, low self-esteem, low self-worth, like that was what was like underneath all the layers. So I cleared the vices first so I could get to the feelings. And then once I got to the feelings, I got to go through the process of allowing and seeing what those really were stemming back to. And then I got to clear that. I got to really allow those emotions to come up and complete and clear that space. So I didn't drag those things with me into this year or the next. So that's a big one, is those underlying like traumas, the underlying emotional baggage you're carrying from your childhood, from past relationships, or from just your own internal horrible trash talking dialogue that just can't come.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because that's really getting to the root of it. And the vices, once you remove that, will reveal that, right? But not a lot of people understand how to get to that, which is why the coach, the therapist, really plays an intricate role in that healing and holding space for you. But for our viewers, I want to keep it as practical as possible. Like, what can we offer them to really start diving deeper into those underlying stories that you are talking about?
I like the metaphor of thinking like, most of you are on here because you probably have like a seed of a dream, right? You've got some sort of dream in your heart. You've got something on your heart that you know that you need to be, do, or create. And even the best seed, no matter how much you nurture it, cannot grow in toxic soil. So you have to be fully aware that if you have not dealt with, and if you just moved through things like something really, you had sexual trauma and you didn't tell anybody, you never talked about it, you just picked yourself up, dust yourself off, and moved on with your life. If you don't have a healed relationship with a loved one who's truly betrayed you, and you're getting triggered on a regular basis when you talk to them or when someone brings her up, I mean, that's evidence to you that there's a part of you that still needs to be healed. So I think it's paying attention. It's starting to really tune in and tap into like your body. Let's say someone brings up a loved one and you had a severe conflict with this loved one in the past. And every time they come up, you're feelings, your body cringes, you feel it on a physiological level, your throat tightens up, that's a sign and signal to you that it may be time for you to get support with helping heal this past trauma or this past wound. And you may decide to take that on your own through a spiritual journey. You know, there's a lot that can be done through meditations, through cutting cord meditations. Forgiveness is the absolute best medicine. I asked Susie Batiste, who is the founder of Poopery, and what she suggested with that when people aren't really ready to let go of something from the past, and they're ready to move on to something in the future, but they haven't let go of that attachment. And she said, don't rush that process. Like really, really work through those feelings. And most importantly, you'll know that that feeling has completed when you look back at a situation with nothing but gratitude. No matter how traumatic, no matter how much pain it costs. Like you can find the seed of the lesson and you can find the seed of growth. And then you look back at that. And when you see it with gratitude, you know that you've really completed that and moved through it. And you're ready to start pushing into this direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Now, this is so good because it really has people like understand that there's a process to it. This is not an overnight thing that you're going to get to. And for those people that love to mental masturbate and like do the fix me forever syndrome, right?
Right.
You can go down the rabbit hole and always find shit because we are evolutionary beings. We're always growing. There's always things to shed. So I want to also be mindful of really pointing that out to people that you are not to make yourself a fucking project, the never ending project. Make yourself the never ending masterpiece.
I love that. I love that because it's all about just revealing and it's all about really unfolding into who you were meant to be in the process, which is really just like someone with childlike innocence, with love, with light, someone who's here to share their unique gifts and talents with the world. But a lot of people don't realize that these underlying feeling tones on a vibrational level are what are holding them back, right? Because let's just say you haven't dealt with it. Clearing space means removing guilt and shame. Yeah. If you're holding guilt and shame around something, you have not cleared space to call in what you want to call in your future. And you really can't because you must be like a vibrational match to what it is you say you want. There are certain things, certain opportunities, certain people that are here on a frequency, not as far as being better than you or above you in any way. We're all equal. But as far as on an energetic level and their vibration, they're operating with joy. They're operating with freedom. And excuse me, is that me? Pardon, guys. Should be on silent. But when we're carrying guilt, shame, anger, resentment, we're down here on a vibrational scale. And that means that doesn't matter how much action we're taking and how hard we're working towards our goals, we're still not vibrating at the level that's going to be a match.
Which brings us to the point that you were saying earlier. You could be doing all the fucking things, but if your energy is not in alignment, you will be sabotaging, canceling it out, blocking it, self-sabotaging, all of it because your energy is not the space for that to emerge.
Been there, done that a million times. And I know this from experience. There was so much stuff I was carrying that I didn't even realize until the past few years that I was carrying. And I could not figure out why I was doing that 2 steps forward, 10 steps back too. Like I was going for everything and stuff just, wouldn't match up sometimes. And that's life. Don't get me wrong. You're going to have things that aren't meant for you and they're just not going to fall into your space. And that's okay. You don't want everything in your space. And if you're operating on that low vibrational level, harboring old feelings from the past of resentment, anger, guilt, shame, you have got to clear that space to really raise your vibration and then literally have the energetic body to hold the life that you're calling in. Because if you're stuffed up, think about it like, if you think about it like a bag of trash, right? Like if you're an empty vessel and then you're stuffed with all this trash from the past, like there's no space for all these cool things that you want to call in. There's no space for a new boyfriend when you're still have all these past stories about how your ex treated you and how this is all you've ever known. There's no space for, really cultivating prosperity when you haven't even taken a true look at your finances and started to cultivate a healthy relationship with money. So like you got to do the underneath work. You like gardening, like we talked about, your dreams cannot grow in toxic soil. So you have to go and dig up the weeds
and fertilize the soil. and prep the soil in such a way that it is, what's the name that I'm coming up with? Fertile. So that it can be prosperous. Your energy is like a garden. I love that analogy. So we are creating awareness around what's not working, what's not feeling well. We're creating this awareness of the underlying conversation, that underlying wound that is dominating you through these vices, through avoiding, through your
Consciously
busyness.
dominating your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's move on. How do we shed these things?
Well, I think Amber spoke to it, you know, and I think you spoke to it a little bit. Sometimes it really is that hard hit. Sometimes it really is that hard hit for you to realize. I would say be proactive. I would say do like, what is it? I want to say somatic work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit? Because I'm not an expert in this. I've done it for myself, but I don't lead it. And I know that you've helped facilitate some of that. So that type of work, energy work, uh, working with a coach. Like I said, cutting cord meditations are great. Um, Forgiveness meditations are great. And I also think one of the smallest but biggest steps that we can take, like it's the most simple, is truly being aware of your self-talk and removing negative self-talk. Like you want to clear space, remove negative self-talk, build an awareness of how you're talking to yourself. And when you're starting to plant those you're planting weeds. Every time you talk to yourself in a way that's disempowering, you're planting a weed right around your dream, and it's just going to start pulling your dream down and you're not even realizing it. So if you can just get aware of your self-talk and start clearing that negative self-talk on a daily basis and replanting that with a more empowering thought. That's one of the most simple ways. It's not easy because you're repatterning years of conditioning, but it is a really tangible, easy action step as far as something that you can do now to start making change.
I love that. And I really want to stress the one that you keep bringing up, forgiveness, because I think that's the one that a lot of people struggle with initially in their journey of self-acceptance and healing and deep discovery. Forgiveness can be a trigger in itself. When you bring that word up, they're like, forgive who? No. And what it really boils down to is forgiveness of self, right? Because when you truly get that, there's, like, for me, true radical forgiveness is knowing there's nothing to forgive, because I authored that for my highest awakening, for my highest evolution, and all souls played a part because we created that soul agreement.
Sure,
So
you're evolved.
yeah,
You're thinking very, um, was it very enlightened thinking? But for those of you that just aren't there yet, and you just need more something that's a little bit more like I can grab that. Uh, a couple
I'm
things
evolved, but I still have my shit. But go ahead.
that's helpful is knowing and believing that every act is either an act of love or a cry for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time, people that are hurting us hurt people. So when you can step back, and this is one of my favorite acronyms too, is CEO perspective, taking on a compassionate, empowered observer perspective, not just for everybody else, but for yourself. And when you can step back as the CEO of your life, and you can look at every situation, every scenario, no matter who did what to who, and go back to Anne Marie's radical responsibility, go back to some of these videos about taking ownership for your life, taking radical responsibility without blame, and looking at yourself with compassion and that person with compassion, getting empowered by knowing since you took radical responsibility, you have the ability to shift the situation. And observer, like you're just witnessing. Like there's no judgment. You're just witnessing what happened here. And when you witness it, knowing that every act is either an act of love or a cry for it, you shift yourself from victim and from blame into someone who's empowered and understanding, someone who's showing up with love, looking at life through the lens of love rather than the lens of fear. So I'm sure if you think about who's hurt you in your life, if you really, really think about where they're at in their life, they were either probably trying to keep you in the bubble and protect you and hold on to the version of you that they knew, like they were doing something to love you, even though it didn't look or feel like it. Or they were truly hurting and they were projecting and inflicting their pain upon you. And those are just two things that have really helped me to forgive others and myself, is just to kind of be honest about where those people are at and where they really were coming from, me included.
Absolutely. And knowing that you on a vibrational, on an energy level, attracted that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we attract our, I believe, and this is just my perspective, I believe we attract people that we connect on our lower vibes. So through our pains and our wounds, and also through our higher purpose, through what we're here to do, to serve, to be in purpose of. So when we look at it that way, there's this beautiful exchange of energy, and we're both teachers and students, and we're in this game of awakening and reminding each other of who we are by being mirrors of what's possible, what we see in each other. I think this is so powerful. Forgiveness, it has truly been a game changer in my life.
It is like, it's like the tractor, it's the plow. Forgiveness pulls all those weeds down. It is the one thing I think that will actually literally clear the most space, because it handles so many of those low vibrational emotions. It handles guilt, it handles shame, it handles anger, it handles resentment. I mean, name some others, but it plows them out of the way, and it just leaves nothing but love. And then you're from here to here, like real quick, 0 to 100 real quick, when you learn to truly cultivate forgiveness. And it's an ongoing process in life. We're going to be constantly tending to that garden. We're going to be constantly having to go back and, oh, I missed this weed here, like that still triggered me, this wound still, it still kind of stings, that was salt that you just put there, like, and then you go back to that process of forgiveness. It's everything. It's everything.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to ask you one more question before we move on to our last question that I ask all my speakers. And I really want to acknowledge you, babe, because you've been bringing up the other speakers, and I think that's such a beautiful sisterhood act, to really bring up the other speakers and bring up the other their other messages. I think that's really powerful and beautiful of you, and I thank you for that. This is what it's all about.
It's all intertwined. This is basically, like we talked about, this is kind of like the underneath. This is the groundwork for the things that they were speaking to.
Yeah. So we're creating space by shedding what's no longer you. And how do you know, because we're always evolving, we're always changing, we're always shifting, how do you know that you are arriving to that you, to that David?
I love this question, because this one was one of my biggest shifts in the past year. And it's just because you're no longer worried about putting on the masks. Now, you may be wearing a mask like subconsciously, right? You might still be, I've got this mask, or I've, the gotta look good mask, whatever. But overall, you'll notice that you are stepping into your authentic self, your truth. You're not afraid to just speak what feels right on your heart. You're not afraid to put yourself out there and worried about outside validation or outside approval. You will really feel like, not like I got this in some sort of cocky or prideful way, but you'll really feel like, wow, like I feel truly good about who I am and who I be and how I'm showing up to life. And it's that like internal validation of like, this feels right. This feels really in alignment for me. And I think that that's the biggest way. But, once again, we're talking about clearing space, and we're talking about awareness. You got to know what masks you're wearing. You have to know, what you've been kind of fronting. And, if you look at it, you'll know. And if you don't know, get a coach. They'll tell you. They'll let you know. But that's a big one, is clearing those masks, because when you do, we're talking about success. People want to know you. They want to see you. And when they see you, and when you show up as yourself, like, you give permission to other people to do the same. And that's embodied leadership. That's inspiring. That's attraction. That's what people gravitate towards, is authenticity and transparency. So clearing space is also just tearing off those masks of like mine was always, I've got this, right? And I didn't. Oh my gosh, I was dealing with depression. I didn't have shit. I was really truly suffering on the inside. But sharing that was freeing. So I would say tear off the mask and just be and do you.
I want to touch on one mask that is like, so sorry, that was me now. So one that I definitely growing up as a teen, it became my thing because I grew up seeing my mother be extremely abused by my stepfather. And I put on the fake it till you make it. And that actually was like my motto, like fake it till you make it. I will get there and nothing's gonna break me. And fuck, I had the fuck it button and the fake it till you make it because I never wanted people to know how deeply I was hurting inside.
And that's most people's reasoning, right? That's most people's reasoning. Even bigger than masks, guys, old identities.
Yeah.
Old identities, like the shy girl, the nice one, the strong one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
give that stuff up. If I was still wearing the I'm strong, I probably wouldn't be on this call right now because I wouldn't have reached out for support with my business, right? And I never would have met Michelle. So it's in that like willingness to just tear down and tear away from everything that you really thought you were to just actually learn who you are.
Right. This is so good. And speaking of identities, I don't know if you see this challenge that's going on about the 10-year challenge. So I started coaching 10 years ago and I was looking through pictures, and one of my identities 10 years ago was the party girl, the
Okay.
P girl, like never make lines. And I was going through this picture like, damn, man, I was like all in these raves and shit. But that was an identity. That was an identity that I like was attached to. It gave me validation, it gave me importance. And it's really this thing that you bring up with identities is so important because this thing with identity is so important because sometimes we forget that it's an identity. Sometimes we forget that it's a mask because we've been playing that game for so long that it really needs us to like sit back and be like, wait a minute, who am I? Who do I want to be in 10 years? Who do I want to be in 5 years? Who am I striving to become? And that conversation is going to open you up to be like, wait, this isn't it. Right. I'm so off the mark, right?
I mean, one of mine was that I was an F up. Well, of course I was living my life that way. Like literally, that's who I thought I was. That was my identity that I had taken on and believed to be true about myself. So all of my actions accordingly followed through with that. I would literally sabotage anything and everything just because that's who I thought I was.
So good. So good. So now my last question, darling, and thank you so much for dropping so much wisdom and nuggets and just gracing us with your presence. You are an epic leadership coach. You are an amazing coach. And I want to ask you, what are your top 2 to 3 tips on creating an epic year? You are an epic leadership coach. You are.
She can play it for us. Well, okay. So I think number one, you've got to be true to you. You've got to honor yourself. So like the how is get quiet and still and go listen to what lights you the fuck up. And yes. Language, but you have to listen to that because if you're living somebody else's dream, doing somebody else's goals, being driven by things like money, when you don't actually care about money, when you really care about freedom, like you have to listen to you and figure out what aligns for you, and you have to go after it, like 100%.
Coach, and yes. I don't know why that's keeps going. Yes.
That would be my number one, is like literally get clear on what it is that you want to create, like what is success to you, not to anybody else, and just get really clear on that before you ever start just aiming in the dark and throwing darts at goals. Like make sure it's what you want, because you could head down a path and then you're gonna have to turn around and you want it to align for you. I'm just gonna piggyback on Amber again, like spirituality, whether your belief is God, energy, universe, like I have up here, with God all things are possible. I know for a fact, like in my moments of surrender, are my power. That's my power move, guys. Like when life is breaking me or when life is taking me, it doesn't matter. Like if it's putting me on my knees or if I'm on an elevator, like if I really want to go somewhere, like get into surrender to something bigger than you, because the very power that woke you up this morning is greater than any circumstance you face, including the amazing opportunities and the terrible obstacles, right? So either way, like surrender to that power, like ask to be led, like get the wisdom and take aligned, committed action through what you download and what you hear. That's what inspiration is. It's in spirit. It's being inspired to take that action. So, it actually precedes my number one. Like, do that, and then the number two will follow, or the number one will follow. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Locked. But
I love that. So defining your success, really getting clear on what lights you the fuck up, and to really surrendering, like making that a practice of surrendering to something much bigger than you, getting into the practice whether I love that analogy, because a lot of people, when they're on the elevator, they forget.
yeah, and then they try to power through and do their own thing, and that's where you get knocked down right back to the bottom.
That's when I say that people are playing God in their bubble, because now they're like, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. But then when they're in the bottom, right, is when they remember, is when they start calling out for this higher power. And I love the analogy, making it a practice even on both, especially on